Chug and Spook. When I found out that Heddon released this lure a couple years ago, I was very excited because one of my favorite topwater lures, if not my favorite topwater lure of all time, is the original Spook. There weren't very many of these popping style walking baits on the market, at least none that I could find that were readily available. So I was very happy to see that a company that was so available like Heddon came out with this lure. They have them on Tackle Warehouse for $7.59, which is where I got them from. And you can see that I have two different sizes. I have this larger one and the smaller one. The large version comes in a length of 4 and 7/8 inches, and it has a weight of 1 ounce. And it's a topwater floating lure, obviously, just like the smaller version, but it has a length of 3.5 inches and a weight of 1/2 ounce. They both have a rattle in them. The larger one actually has what seems like a dedicated chamber here towards the rear. There's actually two chambers. There's one that is like a balancing chamber that has a ball bearing in it, and then there's one just forward of that one right here. You see where it says Chug and Spook, the one that the ball that's rolling back and forth there? That's the rattle to it. And as you move this thing through the water, it actually has that nice rattle sound to it. I can't see in the smaller version, but I can only imagine that that sound that you hear that's rattling around in there is probably more like this Super Spook Junior, which in fact is the same exact size. I actually prefer the smaller size of the Super Spook Junior over the larger one because it just seems to get bit a little bit more. I'm gonna go over some of the features of this lure, or I guess it would be lack of features because there's really not much going on with it. You can see it has a 3-dimensional holographic eyes. It says Chug and Spook Junior there on the back. I typically don't care too much for these hooks that come on the Heddon lures. They're these, I believe they were made by Excalibur. They're like a rotating TX3 or something like that. I mean, they're okay. They're not plated with anything, and you can see that they call them that rotating because if you look at the hook closely, you'll see that it's actually canted to the side. It's supposed to either be able to penetrate the fish's mouth easier or hold on to the fish a little bit better. I'm not quite sure. I normally replace the stock hooks with these black nickel plated hooks. These ones I believe are Gamakatsu hooks. One of the main differences that I saw in this lure while I was fishing with it was how it sat in the water. For those of you that fish a normal spook, in this case a Super Spook Junior, you'll notice that they sit slightly canted in the water. For some people just starting out topwater fishing, you might find it slightly difficult to walk this lure because you actually have to pop it to get it up on plane and then start working it. If you don't get a really good rhythm going with it, you'll end up fighting it because it wants to sit tail down in the water. The difference between the newer lures or the Chug and Spook is that it actually sits almost perfectly horizontal in the water. It's probably just a little bit easier to walk in the water than the earlier generations of the standard Spook. As you would expect, this lure casts really well, which shouldn't be a surprise because it's just very aerodynamic looking and it's smooth and it's tail weighted. You can see it's all painted over. The line tie eyelet there. I use a loop knot when I use these lures. It gets a little bit more freedom of movement. The stiffness of the fishing line that you may use doesn't interfere with its sachet in the water. This lure is called Okie Shad. The color of it is, at least. It's got a chartreuse back. It's kind of transparent. It's a little pink. It has kind of a hologram partition in the forward part of it. This one's called Baby Bass. And the interesting thing about this lure is it actually looks different on Tackle Warehouse. In fact, I'll just go ahead and show it to you on my phone there. On my phone, you'll look at Baby Bass and it says, or it shows you just a different color altogether than what you're looking at with this. Not to be confused with Florida Bass, because they have Florida Bass, but Florida Bass is actually transparent. You can see through that bait. Baby Bass actually has a black and olive back to it, that black lateral line, kind of an off-white pearl white belly there, which is going to be the business end of this lure. There's not a whole bunch of rolling going on with this lure. When I look at these lures, I can't help but get slightly sentimental just because of the fact that This was actually the first topwater lure that I used to effectively catch bass. And it was actually one of the first topwater lures, if not the first topwater lure that I used to learn how to do that sachet walk the dog action. Now that they have the Chug and Spook with that cupped mouth, I mean, I can't help but just love this one as well. I didn't speak about its effectiveness as far as how it pops in the water. It certainly, as you would expect, throws more water with that open mouth. I think that goes without saying just because of the nature of how you work this bait. That's really all I have to say about this lure. There's not a whole bunch going on with it. I mean, it's got a rattle, it's got a cupped mouth, it's got hooks that are not very good, and it'll flat out catch you fish, and they're available and they're not very expensive. If you guys like the video, please hit the like button. That helps out a lot. If you're not a subscriber, please subscribe to my channel. That's going to give you the direct line to all of my new videos that I have coming out. You guys can check me out on Facebook and Instagram as well. If you guys have any comments or questions, you can leave those down below. There's a lot of people that watch these videos, so there's a lot of people out there that could answer questions that I may not be able to answer for you, especially if I left something out. Stay tuned for the next review. I don't know what we're going to do next. It will almost certainly be some kind of a topwater lure. Stay tuned for those. Hopefully I'll have those out in the next couple days.